Welcome to In the Rising podcast. My name is Bettina Brown, and this is the platform I've chosen to talk about living a life that's in alignment with your hopes, your dreams, and your goals. And I love to share stories of other people, especially women, I'll be partial, who have just overcome so much. And my guest today, Keke Olisemeka, is an immigrant, is a mother, is an entrepreneur, is now a CEO, and is just leading the world with her following on Style Your Selfie on Instagram and just living her own life and light and sharing that. And today she shares with me how she got from point A to point B, and I'm so excited that you are going to hear her today. I'm thrilled. I am really thrilled. I'm honored. And anytime I get to speak to a woman who's following her dream, I feel like I'm in the presence of someone just lighting up the world with that internal light that we need more of. So it fuels my soul to talk to you today, Keke. And you have like a whole list of stuff that you do. You're a social influencer, an entrepreneur, and you're also a founder and CEO of the Global Style Your Success Project, a movement and community for multi-passionate female entrepreneurs. And I am a female. I'm a little more partial towards our or anyone who identifies as such. Share with me, of course we don't have hours to go into this, which we should, but share with me how you got to this place where you are today, like where you feel this pull to help other women, other entrepreneurs?
So I think I would say that I've always had that. I just didn't know it. Right. And it's when you look back in your stories, because, sometimes you have to take inventory and you realize, oh, my goodness, I actually have been doing this. So in my 20s is when this narcolepsy started. So, and I've been battling it now for 25 years. So, but I remember, like coming out of college, it's always very ambitious. And I just thought like, I'm about to be on the cover of lots of magazines. that was my one goal. And I loved to work and I was very curious. And I always had this thing where I could teach myself stuff. Mm-hmm. So when I came out of college, and bear in mind that I'm also an immigrant. I'm not sure if I'm first generation or whatever, but I am. And so there's a learning curve. It's actually quite different if you're not born here and you've lived here. I've been here since I was 18. So I've been here for 32 years, but still there's something. So came out of college and just knew, all right, let's go look for this whole career thing. And I was a receptionist. And then I went to a party and I saw my peers and they were all working in corporate professional jobs, being analysts and engineers. And I knew they were making way more than me. And I just thought, well, something ain't right. I'm going to have to fix this situation. And less than a month after going to that party, I had gotten myself a job as an analyst at MCI. I'm not sure if you...
I do.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
So I done everything, got into MCI, and I just thought to myself, oh my goodness, they let me in. And the next thing I turned and I told my twin sister, I'm going to get you in here. And in a week, she was working there. And then I turned to my cousin, I'm like, I'm going to get you in here. And then the week she was working there, and then a friend of mine. And so I've always had this whole, well, first of all, we're going to try something. I love trying something new and always aspiring to be more. And once I get there, it's well, it's no fun if you at least don't have your friends and your girlfriends around. and that's what I did. And so in less than a month, we were 4 of us working there. And I wasn't mad at the little bonus they gave me. And then from there, of course, MCI had this big, MCI was always laying people off. Mm-hmm. I think I was one of the ones that were laid off because that was the onset of narcolepsy. Mm. And it didn't make any sense because I thought this was the job that I wanted. Why can't I stay awake? I didn't know what it was. And so, and the unfortunately, what happens is sometimes I fall asleep and I don't know that I've fallen asleep. So I could be having this conversation with you and you're looking at me weird. And it's not until I say something inappropriate that I realize that I've fallen asleep. So I'm thinking they probably walked by my desk and thought, what, lazy bum. So I made one of the cuts of the whole laying off, although my boss really loved me. And after that, I was offered a couple different, like, temp positions. Then temping was very popular. And every company I worked in, they liked me, but I couldn't stand just because I was falling asleep. I was convinced it was because I didn't like this whole systems. I wanted to be able to just talk to people, do. So I literally got to a point where I was offered almost twice what I was making. I mean, that's how much I'd taught myself like the systems and understood what was going on. But I didn't want that. And then one day I went to one of these search firms to look for a job. And the girl that was interviewing me, like I literally fell in love with her. She was so happy, so upbeat. And I just thought, I want this job.
Yeah.
And they said, oh my gosh, I'm long-winded. They said no. I fought for 6 months to get that job. And I got that job. And the first time I placed someone in a new position, I just knew this is what I want to do. I want to give people something they never knew they always wanted. Because I took her, she was a VP actually, like out of her job, and I got her almost a 50% increase. Because I kept fighting with my client. Like, I don't want to come back with something measly, right? And so I positioned my clients and all that. And when I placed this lady, she darn near said, what? And that's when I just knew, like, oh my gosh, I love giving people stuff, like, like with jobs and all that, making them happy and helping them get what they want. But anyway, just fast forward, we're at a place where I finally find out it's narcolepsy. It robs me of my life for 20 years. Just a zombie at home, sleeping literally almost 20 hours a day, but managed to marry and have 4 kids instead of that. And then 5 years ago, I was invited to a fashion show. I happened to be in Paris as someone's plus one. And there, sitting inside of a fashion show, I woke up. The experience was like I was sweating, the blood vessels, like everything was jumping in every direction. And I realized that I had been numb, that I was just barely surviving, no such thing as thriving and all that. That was in 2016. In 2016, I did not know what a blog was. I did not know too much about Instagram. I thought it was for the Kardashians where they posted ridiculous looking pictures. I didn't know what filters were. I just thought, what are these pictures? But I came back from that show because I was talking to this girl that I met there, and she had her whole life planned out. And I was looking at her, and for the first time I realized I didn't have a plan, didn't have anything to look forward to, didn't really have a life, like nothing exciting. I was just functioning. And when I came back, first thing that occurred to me was a blog. I bought like a $97 thing. And the very next month I had a blog. But not before I fought the biggest bout of imposter syndrome, which I did not know what that word was because I've always grown up confident. What I didn't know was that 20 years of battling a condition where your body betrays you on the regular, many times a day, it does start to chip away at your confidence. So I used to love fashion, but I was no longer, like, I put on weight and all the different drugs and stuff that were thrown at me. So the first day I said, oh, I'm going to do that. And I was supposed to do a photo shoot the night before or the day before. I went to my closet. I spent 11 hours trying to pick out one outfit.
Oh, yeah.
As a good Christian woman, girl, I thought Oh, it's the devil throwing all his arrows, everything he's got at you. He told me to have all the seats, have several seats. Who said you can dress? Aren't you the one that said you were a fly on the wall? No one noticed you. All of these things. But even through that, I didn't know that I had already like almost come up with some kind of framework for, because I just looked, and by the 11th hour, and all I could do was a pair of white jeans and a white bomber jacket for my 11 hours. That's all I had to. I said, you know what? It's okay. And at that point, I gave myself permission. I gave myself permission to be laughed at, permission to be ridiculed, permission to be thought of as a fraud. One thing I didn't say was, as in the 20 years where this narcolepsy was taken over, my twin sister and I were identical and always lived what I believe like parallel lives, right? And even every job she's gotten, I've gotten for her. When I became a headhunter and she saw how much money I was making with a raging case of narcolepsy in my 20s, I was making six figures, like with a raging case of narcolepsy. She begged me, I got her into my company. So I've always gotten her every job, but we've always been, like equal playing field. And it felt like in the 20 years, I used to say like we were at, if you look at a clock, we were at like 9 and 3. And slowly everything just started to tip. And I just went all the way down to 6. And while she went to 12, and it seemed like she was just on top. I could not recognize her and I couldn't recognize myself. It's a vast difference. And people, and I'm not sure if it was my perception, but I pretty much know, like I was a nobody to people. And you can imagine, like I've not always been that. Like I've always been someone who's prided myself in just being confident out there, getting myself what I want, right? And now it's like you walk in a room and no one notices. So all these things came back and like, well, how are you going to do it? You walk into the room and no one notices. And so I just had to tell myself, it's okay. Permission to fail. Laughed at. Permission for people to say that you're trying to be, because if anyone was going to be the fashionista, it's my twin sister. And so what business do I have? And in the end, I just looked in the mirror. I'm like, you know what, girl, you got this. You're fabulous. You can do this. And, I'm sure that there are women out there like you who are feeling some type of way, who maybe they've had kids. They're just not where they don't recognize themselves anymore. So the premise of the whole thing was, you can look at me and you can style your selfie. So for my blog, my fashion blog, I go under style your selfie. And that was just the thing. Look at me and know what to wear, because that's one of my biggest challenges. And I didn't want to go anywhere because I never knew what to wear. And then began this process. And women started to respond. The past 5 years, if I tell you the number of things that I've done in the past 5 years, where I've been, where I get recognized. And I just thought, this imposter syndrome, again, like I said, I thought it was a devil. It wasn't maybe until about 2 years ago that I was minding my business. I'm like, wait a minute, that wasn't the devil. It's imposter syndrome.
And that's so common. That is so common for people to feel very confident in a skill, but especially going outside into something new, especially where you're visible, a blog or YouTube. But, in that, I heard some of your conversation that, we are all diamonds. Some of us are just covered in coal, and we identify as the coal. I think imposter syndrome is, instead of identifying with the diamonds, because you'll shine right through that.
Absolutely. And then we magnify what other people have and minimize. And so as we increase what someone else has, every time we do that, we decrease what we have. And of course, that comes from somewhere, that's, and it's, and I think that some part of it, yes, it's our inner critic is what we tell ourselves. And then there's also some other parts where you've been fed that. So, and when you now get to a point of something you really want, because I think it has to be something that's so important to you.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that most people who suffer it are people who really have a lot to offer.
Mm-hmm. That's a good
Because
way
I
of
don't
putting that.
think, yeah, absolutely. I have not seen one person, because you've seen some loud and wrong people. So I truly believe that people who want to serve, who have something to offer, are the ones that get hit by this the most.
Yeah.
And another thing is, for every level, just like they said, new levels, new devils, maybe they were talking about imposter syndrome too, because the one that attacks you in the beginning is not the one that attacks you at a different milestone.
Yeah.
So you just try to exercise your right to create, and it's over. And unfortunately, sometimes we prepare for one and don't prepare for the other, and get stuck like everyone else.
Yeah. I have a question
So,
for you though. When you said you met this person who kind of had her life planned out, you realized you didn't, and then you're like, okay, boom, starting a blog, on the roll. Did you just kind of look at the next step after this step, or did you already kind of like, you know what, this is my goal 5 years from now, 10 years from now? How did you do that, Keke?
I somehow just knew this is a beginning. Just start. I definitely knew it wasn't the end. I knew it was a means. And so I just started. And surely within 5 months of doing that, I'm like, this can't be it. This can't be it. So the very first time I was invited to speak, I think I was 4 months into this, and I'm thinking to myself, no, don't you know, take a look, 4 months, ain't no way I know what the industry is. And the lady, it was the head of the fashion group, as an whatever body. It's actually an international body, like a fashion group. And they have a chapter in DC. And she asked me to speak. I'm like, no, don't you see? I just started. She looked at me and she's like, you've got everything you need. And I spoke that night and literally got off the stage. All the established bloggers were there. And I got down the stage, and these women made like a dive, and they were older women, like, consultant. I didn't know what that was. So, but it was just maybe some inner wisdom and intuition that I probably played down, but I spoke. And some lady just came to me and she was like, I just want you to know you were the most impressive on that panel. I was like, wow. But so it was the feeding, the psychological was more than any likes, any engagement, because I knew that something I said. The lady who actually was the director of the fashion group came to me and she grabbed me and she was like, oh my gosh, I just got diagnosed with cancer. But listening to you, I know I'm going to beat this cancer. And I was looking at her wider because I was trying to figure out what I could have said to inspire this statement. But in the past 5 years, I can't tell you how many times I've had experiences like that.
Yeah.
And so, and like, I'm a woman of faith, and every time something happens, I have to kind of sit and wonder, like, what? And so, and I have lots of conversations with God. It's actually very funny. Like, I thought it was a fashion. What's going on? And he was like, oh, no. The fashion, that's the drawer, that's the candy. And then you deliver the message. And so the message of the diamonds was given to me like 3 years ago. I was like, ooh, this is too much. It's 3 years ago. It's like, my daughters, they're not doing what they're underperforming. And of course, when we underperform, we don't get as much as we're supposed to have. So see, I actually believe, like you've heard of the term creator economy. And the first time I heard it, I burst out laughing. And I just thought, finally, we are in the economy of the one who created us. And inside of this economy, there's no cap. The truth is, we're all creators. We've always been. The question is, what are you creating? Some people create a right mess. I've done a few of those myself. I used to be, I don't want to belong there, but once in a while I'm going to throw a good doozy. But I've done that. But we're always creating. The question is, are we consciously creating, or are we going along? Are we shipple, just moving and letting stuff happen to us? Or are we out here being intentional and sitting down and thinking and doing? But are we creating? Absolutely. When a few years ago, inside the throes of narcolepsy, and where I felt like a liability, like there's nothing else I have to offer this world, I watched a program, and it was about this inventor. And he talked about how these inventions wouldn't leave him alone.
It kept pulling, it was drawn to it.
Multiple, like, I'm like, so I remember thinking to myself, well, how fair is that? Why would you give someone so much and one person cannot even figure out how to get out of the door? What is that? And it wasn't until afterwards, when I started this, that I went from being so unsure of myself, putting 11 hours to put one outfit together, to me literally outfits putting themselves together in front of, like, I would stop everything I'm doing, go pull a couple things, like things I could never do on my own, for that to happen. But it wasn't just creating that. I started a clothing line in the process. I have a docu-series. I have an 8 episode that I woke up one morning and just thought, you should do a show. And a month later, I had a crew and I was recording. So I just thought, oh, we all have it. But it's like every muscle, you don't exercise it, it's latent, it's lazy. You exercise it, you multiply it, more things come to you.
Yes.
So we are in an economy, and I honestly now believe that it is our originality, it is our, like, success comes from what you have, like what you've been given, whether it's one thing, 5 things, 10 things, like the parable of the talents. Some he gave 1, some he gave 10, whatever it is, right? And if we use that, it makes room for us. But we've been taught to be multiple different variations of the same thing. And so we get into this struggle and everybody is in a fight to be the same thing.
Yeah.
Because it's too scary to be original.
Yes.
And that's where style your success came from. Because I personally believe, and I know it's like success should be like according to your own voice. You get to style it. What's style? Style can be a noun, it's a verb. It's the way you do things. It's what works for you. It's the way that you were created, right? So you get to, my husband just, so you get to create it. And so now, like, I came up with this whole formula for success. It's like your style plus soul, which is what is inside you, that gift, plus strategy, and then steps. That's how you get your own version of success.
I like the idea of that your style of success is different. It's not just the success, the houses, the whatever. You see the same images, right? Or that some person's success can be the adventures, rock climbing without any equipment. That's their version of success.
Yeah.
And they're not interested in other things. And that is okay. That is
okay. And it's when you get to that point that I believe like liberation actually comes, right? I grew up in a family, I've got 4 sisters, so we're 5. We've always loved fashion, this, that. I have one sister who is so bougie. Everything about her is high class. And at first I thought I wanted that, until I'd see the same people over and over again and not remember them. And I'm thinking to myself, is your memory that bad? But I'm like, well, wait a minute. in the whole inspirational coaching, whatever, I remember people. That must mean that I don't care for this as much as I thought like I was supposed to.
Yeah.
And so now having the rights to say, that's great. I mean, I might hang around and stuff like that, but I'm not going to, this is not my life. This is not what fills me up. This is
Yes.
not what makes me. And we've all been given ours. And but unfortunately, you know, a lot of people just don't. A lot of people just fight to be the same person.
To be everybody else or what those roles
Yeah.
are. I'm not stride anymore. Why not? What I would ask you is, at this point, what do you tell women that's important for them to rise up? Because my podcast is In the Rising. As you're in the rising, what would be one or two things that you would just love to share to other women?
I believe it starts with self-knowledge, self-mastery. If you don't know yourself, then everything you're getting is just a version of what you've been told. And so I, like on my Instagram page, I've got Keke 2.0, the 2.0, because in the 1.0, we're who we're told we are. 2.0 is where you find yourself. 2.0 is where you actually are excited, you want to see yourself. And for me, it's like when you find yourself, you fall in love with yourself and you double down. You become more of yourself because that's exactly what you were created. Now, that informs everything, because if you don't know who you are, people end up in the wrong relationships. People end up going after things they never wanted.
Mm-hmm.
You're in a trance. So when you start to know yourself is when you're like, okay, true self. And then you start to ask yourself, what do I really want?
Yeah.
And then having the courage, you know, to become that person. And so that really, my mission, part of this is not just helping people like style their success, helping them name it, what that means to them, trying to unearth that gift, recognize, right? But also inside of this whole process is you style yourself, you figure out who you are. The second portion that I believe holds us up, and part of why we have this imposter syndrome, is because we don't make this effort. We don't become the person that we want to be. So that's the second part of what I do, is literally help people create the character, create the new identity that represents. Because most of us, we want something so bad, but we're still in that old identity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is really what, to me, causes this whole imposter syndrome. And inside of that old identity, of course, we're comparing ourselves, whatever. So there has to be an intentional creation of a new identity, more empowered identity, an identity that looks more like where you're going.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's like the ground level. Otherwise, most of us run straight to the strategy, the tactics, all those things, and wonder why, one, we either have like this failure to launch, afraid to go out, or you go so far and then you have to stop because that particular step was missing. It's like the three little pigs building your house on sand and sticks. At some point, it's going to fall.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You have done amazing things. A docuseries, from MCI to style your selfie, building this business, you know, and being a mother and being a wife. You know, these are all very important parts of our wheel of life. Where do you see yourself rising up to next? What do you feel is on the horizon for Keke still?
Wow. So for me right now, the mission is to liberate, empower, and equip as many women as possible to become who they are, and then add massive influence to who they are. The world is changing rapidly.
Yes.
And so the more of us, like with all the breaking down all the barriers and stuff, there's no barrier to entry anymore to the market.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does that mean? It's a lot more people. Well, that means that you have to have a personal brand. You have to have some kind of influence. And once again, it's teaching people like what that looks like and how to create influence so that they're easily recognized. They're like top of mind. They're seen as the influencers. They understand even what that means and how infinite the wealth creation and opportunities are once you take up that role. So
I love the idea of liberate and power. And liberate just means throwing off those shackles, throwing off that dust, throwing off that imposter syndrome. It does not mean that doubt is not there, but it means you know how to face it, right?
Yes.
And so I think you're doing,
and you're even prepared for it.
You're prepared. And I think there was even a sermon that said, life is full of punches. The one that gets you down is the one that you think's never coming. It is coming.
Prepared for it, because when I was a headhunter, when I got that job, the first thing they did was send me off 2 weeks for training. Now I happened to be the last person that was hired into that company under just that company name, because very shortly after I was hired, they had a merger within the company. So I had the luxury of 2 weeks where I was prepared for anything and everything that could happen. They even talked about relationships, hours when you would feel low, so many different things. So I came back like, let me at them. Like, I'm ready for this job. And then we had the merger. And they were trying to, fill seats and all that. I remember sitting, because we all used to be like in this big old bullpen and loved that job. And right next to me, in a year of being there, because I could only work for a year before I had to, like, narcolepsy, there's no way I could work anymore. In a year of being at that job, 60 people came and went. The only difference is that they were not primed and prepared and trained for the journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and it's not just the training of the job itself, but the emotional, psychological, all those things. And I mean, the stories we were told, all the different things to expect. We knew that it was, it's not rocket science. Told about different people in the company, a guy who failed so badly until someone spoke to him, and next thing he became a $3 billion. And that was the only difference, is that none of those guys had the benefit of going through that training. Mm-hmm. And so it is equipping someone. So even if you're becoming an entrepreneur or whatever it is, it's good to know what's coming at you, psychological, whatever it is. And so when it comes, you're like, okay, I was told about
it is. I was waiting for you to show up, good or bad,
yes,
where in perspective, and really knowing what the journey is like, because I think that's where changing jobs, entrepreneurship, starting a business, there's so many unknowns just in general, that I don't feel that that the percentage of failure of like stopping is only due to because people aren't interested. It's you yourself are putting a lot into that to really, you don't deal with mentors as much anymore. I remember I was mentored in my own career. Now I'm like, who's helping you? And it's just like, you're done, go. And I'm like, that's why it fails. That's why companies don't do as well, even if it's a new MCI, our AT&T.
It's funny. Part of, you were asking what I want to do. Part of what I want to do is have like this huge community of women, so they can get support. Mm-hmm. They can get, resources. They're maybe in smaller pods, just something where they feel like they belong, because you see what happened with COVID. And one thing we know is no one's an island. It's the fastest way to get taken out. But if you've got people that you're talking to, and sometimes it's actually easier to talk to someone like you don't know, who hasn't been a friend and all that, you can really bear what's going on. Yeah. Sometimes it's easier, and they can help you right through stuff that maybe you would have acted like irrationally or impetuously, whatever it is, but you get to have people to do life with in a different way, and they can actually help you ride those waves of life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Someone listening to this podcast today is like, I want to get to know this Keke. How can they find you, learn from you? How can they connect with you, get in your programs, etc.?
So I have a website. So the Global Style Your Success project, I'm actually in the process of completing that website right now. I'm on Instagram, and my Instagram is Style Your Selfie. I like to have fun. Why not add fun into everything? So Style Yourself is Style Your Selfie. And yeah, that's where I do my fashion thing. And but my big heart, like I said, my assignment, my mission is just to help women come into their own, to have the courage. It's the number one thing I get asked, I mean, even though it's a fashion page, my DMs are always, how are you able to do what you're doing? And they mean it, like, because I'm originally from Nigeria. And so I have lots of Nigerian women that follow me, but just in general, because, and when they say that, I know what they're saying. It means like, why didn't you believe all the restrictions? Why didn't you play your part? Right? Like, who told you you could do this out here with a husband and four kids? Because I travel, I do. And I think that women want to be seen, want to express themselves fully. But I believe that they can't in this regime that they're in, that tells them that this is, you got to be realistic and do the right thing, whatever. And of course, a lot of them are not doing anything because there are very few models for just going out there and doing what you want to do and be successful. And there's no roadmap. And that's the steps that I was talking about when you have strategy and steps. And so that's what I want to be able to give people. It's like a blueprint, a roadmap, so that they know that, okay, I don't want to do what I'm doing anymore, or I want to do this. What does that look like for me?
Yes.
And then there's a roadmap, and they can have some confidence, at least, that they've done what they can, right? And then also, I could talk about stuff like failure and like, let's embrace it. There's no such thing as winning, just too many things. But it's the number one thing that I see. And for me, it's painful. So I actually know how they feel. Like, I can hear the pain in their voices. They just want to break out of what they're doing. But they're afraid. Maybe someone think they're frivolous. I mean, you can imagine an attorney who's making already 6 figures. Maybe she wants to be an influencer, and people look at her like, you must be crazy.
Yeah.
So just things like that.
Yeah. And I think what's great with the community that you're working on building is that when you work with people that are not able to see your vision, that they'll try to pull you at their level of vision. And that's not bad, their level, but it's not yours. Yeah. And I like how you framed your sentence. My mission, my assignment is this. And when we believe we have a mission and a purpose, it's amazing. Yeah. That's when the light turns on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's very scary still. Super scary, but what are you going to do?
Keke shared so many, I always call them golden nuggets, about her own feeling of imposter syndrome, how we are all born to influence. And so if we just change our mindset, knowing right now you are an influencer, maybe you're not getting paid $1 million to post something on social media, but you are influencing people. You are influencing people because we are always watching, right? We always observe, even when we don't see it. And so I hope you take your opportunity today to influence people to live their own life, share your light, and continue to move forward. Thank you so much for listening to In the Rising podcast. It is such a pleasure to present this, and it's an honor that you listen. And if you felt today's podcast was something that's beneficial for someone you know, I request that you share it, because the more hands and ears that we put podcasts such as these in, the better we all are. And until next time, let's keep building one another up.